It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. It's Monday. Man, it just seems like so much happens over the weekend recently. So this Monday show might stretch into Tuesday. We'll have to see how much we can cover. All right, so what's going on? What's going on here? This isn't a third coronavirus wave. It's a tsunami. From Business Insider. The U.S.'s fall coronavirus surge is already larger than the ones in the spring or summer. The U.S. shattered daily records for cases and hospitalizations in November. The fall surge is poised to become the longest and deadliest one yet. So I guess I don't have to tell you any of this. I only mention it because the graphic was what was really stunning. We see the spring surge, March, April, and May. And that, of course, is the famous curve that we hoped to flatten. So we reached a peak there of cases, and it started to flatten, but then along comes the summer surge, June, July, August, and we peak again, doubling the spring surge. So the summer surge doubled the spring, peaked in mid-summer and started to decline a little bit. And in September, it reached a level still just above the spring surge, if you can picture that. And then, of course, it went on this crazy rise, and now we've already doubled the top peak from summer. So summer doubled spring, fall doubled summer. I guess my question, obviously, then is, what's the winter surge going to look like? Oh, my God, the failure. Just dismal failure. It's pretty depressing. Of course, the surge is not only here in the U.S., Europe. Over 300,000 coronavirus deaths in Europe now. And what is just so infuriating about this, as bad as the virus is, all of this death and suffering, so much of it, just not necessary. Will Morrow writes of the devastation in Europe right now, detailing country by country just how much worse this current surge is. He writes, "How has this situation been allowed to occur, just 8 months after the first peak of the virus on the continent? The first lockdowns took place in March after wildcat strikes that erupted in Italy and Spain forced governments to take action to stem the spread of the virus for fear of a popular revolt over the indifference of the death of thousands. The European ruling class then deliberately adopted a policy, knowing it would lead to hundreds of thousands of deaths. These deaths are not inevitable. They amount to a crime against humanity perpetuated by the capitalist class and its political representatives." That is exactly right. It's true for Europe. It's certainly true here in the United States. Continuing to read here. The European Union used the opportunity provided by the lockdowns to push through 2 trillion euros in corporate bailouts. While the lockdown measures massively cut the spread of the virus, the ruling elite concluded that a confinement stopping production and cutting corporate profits was unacceptable, no matter the number of deaths that would result from lifting the restrictions. Across Europe and in the U.S., governments prematurely reopened non-essential workplaces, herding tens of millions back to work to produce a continued flow of profits. This ensured the continued spread of the virus. This is exactly right. The headline of this article, Capitalism's Crime Against Humanity, from the World Socialist website. Let's stop playing around. Let's stop pretending that the socialists don't have it right. Tired of apologizing for this. I'm not going to be Joe and Kamala. I'm not going to pretend that socialism is a dirty word. I'm not going to give in to the pressure from the right and be shamed and embarrassed to call out the virtues of socialism and the crimes of capitalism. Yes, it's a deadly virus. Yes, it's new. Yes, scientists and medical experts had a lot to learn. But we've known from the very beginning We've known since it first hit China how dangerous this thing was. An immediate, bold action, right from the beginning, could have cut the death tolls to a minuscule fraction of what they are now. This was a choice. And it's all about the money. It's all about the profits. 300,000 deaths in Europe, 250,000 deaths in the U.S. lie directly at the feet of capitalism. I mean, I don't blame people for complaining about lockdowns. How are they going to feed their kids? They have to work or they make no money. Well, the obvious answer is a universal basic income. Some Europeans had to strike for it, as this article mentions. The general strike is a tactic that the U.S. just can't get our heads around. We can't get the people together to do it. That's still something that happens in Europe occasionally, and it worked. And European workers were able to get a little bit of help. It wasn't enough because capitalism rules over there, too. We've said here from the very beginning, not one single person should be forced to work. There should be no forced labor in a pandemic. All work should be voluntary. Everybody should get a UBI. Everybody. Don't tell me there's not enough money to go around. There's plenty. Billionaires have been getting richer and richer every month of this pandemic. You give everybody a basic income. You tell every man, woman, and child in this country, nope, you are not forced to work. Nobody has to work. Now, there is essential work, and we need it to be done, and we're asking for volunteers. So if you can come out and work, we'd be very grateful. We'll give you every possible protection. We'll give you the full capabilities of the federal government when it comes to use of the military, use of the Defense Production Act. But no, they couldn't do that because the profits have to keep flowing. In order to have the necessary public services, keep the lights on, water, electricity, firefighters, just to meet our basic needs, well, we have to have tax revenues, right? Well, how do you get tax revenues? You get tax revenues from private business and private individuals who pay taxes. Well, how do they make their money? Well, they have to make profits. They have to sell you things. It's all based on the consumption, profit, tax, spend cycle. This is the basic, fatally flawed system we live under that just has to end. It all starts with consumption. We have to spend. We have to be out there spending. Because without the spending, we have no profits. And without profits, we have no taxes. And without taxes, we have no public services. It's fatally flawed in its very design, and we have to end it. And even in the best of times, it leaves so many behind. But when we have to meet a real emergency, well, then it really reveals its ugly self. There is no reason in this world that over 500,000 people should be dead in the U.S. and Europe. Just no reason. But we have to be out there. And they've got us so convinced, they've got us so brainwashed in this work and consume cycle that a good portion of us feel like it's a God-given human right to go out to the bar, to treat yourself to a nice meal in a restaurant. It's so important that they're perfectly willing to risk their own lives and the lives of their parents and children and neighbors. They're certainly willing to risk the lives of strangers. That doesn't even enter into the equation for a lot of people. I saw a headline this weekend. Here in Milwaukee, a local bar had a fire and caused quite a lot of damage. But the headline really caught my eye. The place is called Hooligans. And the headline read, "Significant damage to beloved Hooligans bar after roof catches fire." Beloved? Really? I thought, what an odd word to use. But then, after reflecting on it a little bit, yeah, that's really where we are. I've never been a bar guy, and I've never understood that relationship that people have with bars and restaurants. People have this sort of visceral, familial relationship with bars. Now, I say I'm not a bar guy, but I've spent a lot of time in bars and restaurants as a musician. And I've interacted with bar people. I've seen them up close for many years. And it really is more than just an evening out or some place to hang. a little entertainment, a little diversion. It really seems to be a big and deep part of their lives. It is a family relationship. It's beloved. I never understood it, but it's certainly there. So to ask us to go for 6 months or a year even without that particular diversion, to my mind, seems like the simplest ask in the world. Well, of course. What could be simpler than that? Just stay the home. But we can't do it. I don't know how we've been conditioned this way, but we have. And it continues as we are breaking records on a daily basis, day after day after day, now going into the second, third week, breaking records every single day. I don't know about yours, but my feed is still filled with things like this from the Milwaukee Brat House in Shorewood. We're brunching. You should be brunching here with us. Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. with this picture of this very delicious looking food. Oh, look at that pretzel bun. And they're running ads like this every single day. Wisconsin versus Michigan tonight. Oh, and the Packers versus Jaguars tomorrow at noon. Get your football fix at Bratwood. Win a moped. Feeling creative? Make up whatever kind of combo you can dream of. Build your own. Available every day. And this with a picture of a big succulent bratwurst on a toasted bun with cheddar cheese and coleslaw. Be creative. My feed is just filled with this stuff. Stop in for the Badger game tonight and have some fun with us. Lucky Chucky's Beach Bar. Everywhere you turn, there's a siren song luring you to come out of your house and to come have fun with us. Now, of course, the owners of these bars and restaurants have to make a living. The servers, the line cooks, the dishwashers, they have to make a living. They have to pay their rent. They don't want to have to give up their job. So, of course, there's all this pressure. Well, I've got to work. But who in their right mind would go out and do this work, knowing the dangers, if they didn't have to? Give everybody a universal basic income. Shut down all non-essential work. We hear about the dangers of the lockdown. Oh, the isolation, the psychological harm. But above all else, the financial harm. I've got to feed my kids. I've got to go out and work. Well, all those things are true, and all of those things are fixable. Problems that could be addressed. There are lots of ways to safely interact. Outdoors, social distancing, masks, technology, Zoom, etc. If we could just marshal our forces and dedicate them to actually helping people. If we put a stop to all non-essential work, gave everybody a universal basic income, you don't think there would be hundreds of thousands of people ready, willing, and able to serve in these capacities, to help meet the needs of those who are suffering psychologically, emotionally, the students who need to learn, the elderly who need companionship? All of this could be organized. All of this could be done. But it doesn't serve capital. Capitalism is killing us, not the virus. Capitalism is killing us. And a good portion of us are forced to comply or face literal starvation. And some of us are so damn brainwashed, we think life isn't complete unless we're out at the malls buying something, or we're out at a bar or a restaurant feeding our faces and ordering servers around. It doesn't have to be this way. It never had to be this way. Capitalism is killing us. It's got half of us in chains and the other half hoodwinked. I saw another one. Musicians, my fellow musicians, I understand you have to make a living. I understand this. So two of them, Danny and Chris, playing at the Lime Cantina. Another big old post. It's an event page. Oh, don't miss it. Saturday the 14th. Live music at Lime Cantina. And I clicked onto it, and here's what I just find pathetically and sadly ironic. You got your picture of the two musicians. You got your date. You got your headline. And then right under that, stay up to date on coronavirus, COVID-19 information. It's up to all of us to slow the spread of COVID-19. Everyone, including young and healthy people, should avoid large gatherings during this time. Stay up to date with public health guidelines from cdc.gov. And then the details of the event and the address and some comments from folks. Yeah, this little CDC warning, you see it all the time, right? If you're on social media, it just pops up. I mean, talk about sad, pathetic irony. Right in the middle of this event page, we get the COVID warning. Oh, but come on out. Live music. It doesn't have to be this bad. It didn't have to be this bad. It doesn't have to be this bad going forward. Shut down all non-essential work. All essential work should be done by volunteers. Everybody should be getting a universal basic income. The needs of those who need help psychologically, emotionally, kids who need education, elderly who suffer from isolation. Armies of folks could be helping these people if they weren't forced to sling hash down at Denny's. Yeah, never had to be this bad, never did. Well, let's segue into politics a little bit. Bernie, my man Bernie, must have been listening to the log last week because he said word for word what we said. It's not just good policy, it's good politics. Yeah, that's what we were talking about last week. Good policy is good politics. Bernie wrote on Friday, it turns out supporting universal health care during a pandemic is not just good policy, it's good politics. And he points out that 112 co-sponsors of Medicare for All were on the ballot this November. All 112 of them won their races. So a good little reminder from Bernie, who's been busy on the Twitter bot lately. But this was a good reminder. Yep, 112 co-sponsors of Medicare for All on the ballot this November. All 112 of them won their races. Good policy is good politics. Bernie agrees with us. Another headline that caught my eye from Politico. Alito's politically charged address draws heat. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito delivered an unusually inflammatory public speech Thursday night, starkly warning about the threats he contends religious believers face from advocates for gay and abortion rights, as well as public officials responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Alito didn't hold back on controversial subjects, even suggesting that the pressure Christians face surrounding their religious beliefs is akin to the strictures the U.S. placed on Germany and Japan after World War II. Yeah, apparently in this speech, he just goes on and on and on about this weird idea that conservatives have that Christians are being persecuted because of their bigotry. Of course, he doesn't recognize that it's bigotry. Christians apparently have the right to not only oppose gay marriage in their own faith, they apparently have the right to impose that belief on the rest of us. The whole Christian conservative agenda regarding women's reproductive rights, regarding same-sex marriage, any of the LGBTQ issues, Alito is taking this sort of weird extreme view that Christians are the ones being discriminated against and being oppressed because expressing these bigoted views gets some pushback. And any loss they have in the legal system, if they lose in Congress or in the courts or in the court of public opinion, well, then they themselves are being oppressed. This is the extreme conservative Christian view. And it's nutty, and it has no place in the law. And it's one thing to have some loudmouth radio host talking about it. It's quite another to have a justice of the Supreme Court sharing these views, sharing them loudly, sharing them to a partisan conservative conference of lawyers. He has got no place at all on the Supreme Court of the United States. That's exactly the opposite of what a judge should be. And he's lost even any pretense now of being a fair, open-minded jurist. That's just gone. That's just out the window. I said for years that Antonin Scalia had no business on the court for the same reason. He was always spouting off his extreme right-wing views to extreme right-wing groups. Oh, speaking of Antonin Scalia, caught his name in a headline this weekend. An opinion piece in Newsweek by Jason Harrow. According to Justice Scalia, Trump's lawyers should face sanctions for litigation abuse. Remember you and I talked about there is a body of law that speaks to that. Lawyers aren't allowed to bring frivolous cases. And so we were wondering out loud why these ridiculous cases regarding the election that the Orange Menace is bringing and are being just summarily tossed out of court for a complete lack of evidence. They're just not serious. So regarding all of these cases being brought, dozens and dozens and dozens, Jason Harrow writes, it's not exactly clear what Trump's legal objection is, but it appears he'll be arguing that some unspecified number of illegal ballots were counted, and also that there's been a media and pollster conspiracy to mislead the public. Being a sore loser disgraces the office of the president, but acting disgracefully is not illegal. After all, the president and the few remaining pundits who repeat his totally unsupported ideas can't easily be punished for lying to the American people. But, and here's the big but, his lawyers in these lawsuits are different than politicians and pundits. As officers of the court, they swear oaths to present only cases that have a basis in law and fact. If the Trump campaign continues to file cases claiming fraud that lack any actual evidence of fraud or malfeasance, its lawyers should be fined, suspended, or even disbarred. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of the late conservative hero, Justice Antonin Scalia. Scalia weighed in on this issue in 1993. That year, the Supreme Court adopted amendments to the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Under those rules, a lawyer may not sign a paper that is, quote, being presented for any improper purpose, such as to harass, cause unnecessary delay, or needlessly increase the cost of litigation, end quote. The rules also state that the factual contentions in a legal pleading must either have evidentiary support or will likely have evidentiary support after a reasonable opportunity for further investigation or discovery. So, yeah, we've got Antonin Scalia on our side from the grave. These frivolous lawsuits from the Orange Menace are certainly designed to harass and cause unnecessary delay. This Hail Mary pass that they're throwing here is that they could delay or somehow put into question these last states that were called, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, even going back into Michigan and Wisconsin. Sow enough discord and doubt to sully the results in the eyes of the Electoral College, to either create faithless electors or delay the December 14th vote of the electors, take it to the House of Representatives. Yeah, this is their Hail Mary. Now, none of this is going to happen, but none of us can get too comfortable until he's on that helicopter and Joe is raising his right hand. And in the meantime, yes, I agree with Justice Scalia, or more accurately, he agrees with us. The lawyers who are bringing these cases should be fined, suspended, or even disbarred. With Rudy Giuliani right at the top of the list. How does this guy still have a license to practice law? Well, as I warned at the beginning of the show, there's so much in my stack of notes here. I knew we wouldn't get to them all today. But let's close with this. It's from the both sad and funny file. Headline Miami Herald from Friday after you and I spoke. It just got harder for immigrants. The U.S. naturalization test is about to change. U.S. legal permanent residents who apply for citizenship through naturalization on or after December 1st, 2020, will face a more challenging test in which immigrants must prove they can read, write, and speak basic English and have essential knowledge of U.S. history and government. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced Friday the implementation of a revised version of the test. So the changes. There are a certain number of questions and answers in the study book, and then a certain number of questions that you're actually asked. In the old format, there were 100 questions and answers that you would study. In the new format, there are now 128 questions and answers that you study. And up till now, there were 10 of those questions that you had to answer. Going forward, it'll be 20. It doubles the number of questions you have to answer. And then you have to get a certain percentage of those right, and there's your test. So I would hope that folks wouldn't have too much trouble with this. It is very Trumpian to try to make it a little harder on immigrants, of course. But I don't think this is too much of a problem. I think folks will still do fine. The companion story, and this will leave you with a little, I don't know, laugh or cry. Let's choose to laugh. Tommy Tuberville, Republican senator-elect of the great state of Alabama. Writer Kyle Whitmire, in an opinion piece over the weekend, points us to a quote from Tommy Tuberville. He said at a campaign stop in September, "We've gotten away from teaching world history, American history, state history, civics, government. How did we get here?" Tuberville told his supporters at an event in Red Bay, "A lot of these kids don't know. They have not been taught the fundamentals of what this country and how this country was built and why we're here and why we're so strong." But here's the problem. I guess Tuberville had avoided all interviews and debates during the campaign, and he finally gave an interview to the Alabama Daily News, and quoting from Tuberville, "You know, our government wasn't set up for one group to have all three branches of government. It wasn't set up that way. Our three branches, the House, the Senate, and the executive." So, okay, there's that. He doesn't know the three branches of government. This guy was elected to the United States Senate. In the same interview, Tuberville said that Al Gore was president-elect for 30 days before the Supreme Court ruled George W. Bush won the election. Not sure where he got that idea. He also said that World War II was a battle between freedom and socialism. This is how dumb. This is how dumb you can be and still be elected to the United States Senate as a Republican from Alabama. Now, of course, as some wacko right-wingers like to remind us, Hitler did call his party the National Socialist Party. Nazis short for National Socialists. But as anybody who knows anything about anything knows, and this opinion writer Kyle Whitmire reminds us, Hitler's National Socialists were about socialism in the same way the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is about democracy. Because that's what North Korea calls themselves, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Yeah, so that's just an idiotic mistake and or talking point from radical right-wingers. Also, he just didn't notice or doesn't know that the Soviet Union was part of the alliance fighting the Nazis. I guess he didn't get that. So, Tommy Tuberville, good luck in the U.S. Senate. All right, a big week ahead of us. We're just getting started. That's the log for today. I'm Charles Purcell. I love you. Talk to you tomorrow.